Hey, Marshall here to tell you about an incredibly easy way anyone who loves brewing and drinking beer can save a little bit of money. In addition to supporting everything we do here at Brewlosophy, the American Homebrewers Association recently introduced their free Brew Guru mobile app. It offers a searchable database of homebrew recipes, including popular craft beer clones and hundreds of award-winning recipes from the National Homebrew Competition. What's more, Brew Guru has a searchable map of deals at breweries, beer bars, and homebrew shops. Grab the free Brew Guru app for iPhone and Android devices today and follow the path to great beer. Viewed by many as being the easiest way for a person to enter the hobby, due in large part to the fact that it allows one to entirely skip the mashing step, brewing with extract is the most common method used by beginning homebrewers, and some never actually move away from this method. This is the Brewlosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and in this episode, Brewlosophy contributor Malcolm Frazer and I are going to be discussing malt extract, the various forms it comes in, the way it's made, commonly touted pros and cons, and of course, some experiments that we've performed on the topic. Knowing how long you've been brewing, Malcolm, I'd bet cash money you started out as an extract brewer.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I went through a long period, probably different than a lot of brewers nowadays, but I went through a long period of just extract brewing because I had a little bit of fear of switching over. And at the time, I didn't think it was necessary. I thought, like, well, why? You know, I thought extract was for our all grain was for people who just wanted to feel like they're making something extra homemade, you know? So,
definitely.
Yeah. And the equipment. Back then, there wasn't as much equipment. You couldn't just go buy some. You had to make everything. So it was just intimidating.
Totally. I'll never forget going into the homebrew shop up in Bellingham, Washington, and the dude behind the counter telling me that, man, if you like the beer you're making with extract, which I did, I kept going back to the shop at least, telling me like, if that's what you like, then you got to make real beer. And so he told me you got to make real beer, and you don't use any of that syrupy stuff. You use all grains. And I remember thinking, this guy is way too dorky for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now look at us. Jeez.
Yeah, I just, at the time I liked the beer I was making. It's almost like ignorance is bliss. Well, it truly can be because, I think you have a better chance of making good malt or good beer now with liquid malt extract. But back then, you didn't have the turnover, you didn't have the freshness. So I think people really did believe that in those extract twangs or off flavors, and now you can certainly buy liquid extract or even DME in better shape. So
yeah, for sure. I've actually never made a purely extract batch of beer. I was always like from day one, I was an extract with steeping grains brewer. So I'd use some extract, but then I would add some grains into once everything got blended together and just let them steep in the wort for a little bit before the boil. Just from the get-go, that's what I was doing. And I switched to all grain probably 11 or 12 batches in, and that was years ago. And while my extract batches were at the very least good enough to keep me in the hobby, I kept brewing. I've definitely developed some opinions since then that I'm sure we're going to get into a bit later. One opinion I have that I'm pretty certain is as close to fact as any opinion I've ever held before is how fantastic Imperial yeast is, especially since switching to their new pitch-right pouches. I got my hands on some of these for use in some upcoming experiments recently, and despite my love of the cans, I'm really digging the convenience of the pouch, the nice colors to help distinguish what type of yeast it is. Each pouch contains 200 billion cells of the purest yeast on the market. Since I started using Imperial yeast over a year ago, my fermentations kick off within 8 hours, even when fermenting lagers cool. They finish quickly, and I've yet to have any issues with poor attenuation, contamination, or really anything else. Imperial yeast has various ale and lager strains available, as well as some funky stuff for you milk the funkers out there. You can check it all out at imperialyeast.com to see for yourself. I also want to invite everyone who's listening to the show right now to join the Brewlosophy crew along with thousands of other awesome homebrewers in Portland, Oregon from June 28th to June 30th for HomebrewCon 2018. In addition to all of the educational seminars, cool people to hang with, and of course, delicious beer, we've partnered with our friends from Yakima Valley Hops, Imperial Yeast, and Mecca Great Estate Malt to bring conference goers a truly unique and rad experience. Registration opens March 6th, so that's just a couple weeks from now. Don't forget, you have to be an AHA member to register. It's a good idea to be an AHA member anyways, because they do so many great things for homebrewing. You can sign up now at brewlosophy.com/AHA or homebrewersassociation.org. Speaking of Yakima Valley hops, we are so close to having some new merch available in their store. We killed our store a couple of months ago. Handling all of that stuff with the shipping and merchandising and warehousing all of this stuff was just too difficult for, my wife and I in our small little garage to hold it all. So I'm really excited that Yakima Valley Hops agreed to partner with us on this. We've got some new t-shirts that we're going to be selling in the store, some new updated designs that Yakima Valley Hops graphic designer helped us with. I'm really stoked. Also, stay tuned for more information on a bonkers party we're planning in collaboration with YVH for the 2018 Hop Harvest. I don't really have any details to share other than the fact that we are planning something, but it's going to be crazy. We're going to be up in Yakima sometime in September. Stay tuned. It's going to be rad.
Let's talk about the fact that you just said bonkers party.
Bonkers. Remember Bonkers Gum? Do you remember that stuff?
No, yeah, I do. That's not where I went to, though. I went to the fact that it sounded like my dad saying, "This is radical, man," like he was trying to relate.
What's your dad, like a 70s surfer from Southern California?
No, he's like a punk from England, London.
Even cooler.
Southie. He was a South
I don't
Londoner.
Care. Yeah, Malcolm. It's good. The party's going to be bonkers, and that's what matters. I just make up words sometimes. Okay. How would you like an opportunity to ask people like Michael Tonsmeyer, John Palmer, Gordon Strong, and Dr. Charlie Bamforth questions in a live setting that gets answered directly? For just $3 a month, not only do you get to do precisely that, but you also support our efforts here at Brewlosophy. You can head over to patreon.com/Brewlosophy now to check out all of the different rewards you can get for helping us out a little bit. Never before published recipes, unique discounts at Yakima Valley Hops, and much, much more. We're actually, I think in 2 weeks from now, we're going to be hosting Michael Tonsmeyer's livecast, Q&A livecast from our special super secret Facebook page. We've already got over 120 people signed up to attend that. It's going to be so rad. That's patreon.com/Brewlosophy. For other ways you can help us to continue bringing you this podcast, you can head to brewlosophy.com/support, where you'll find a bunch of links to places to shop online. Something as simple as bookmarking and using them has a huge impact. We want to thank everyone who's remembered to do that. Also, thanks to the 150 plus people who have taken the time to rate and review the Brewlosophy podcast. It really is great for us to get that feedback, even when it's not super positive. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review. We would really appreciate it. All right, Malcolm, we've got a little bit of feedback, one of which has to do with these podcast reviews. I read through all of the reviews. Nearly all of them are positive, which is really encouraging, but a couple people did mention being none too pleased with this first segment of the show. Exactly what we're doing right now, all of this jibber-jabber, where we go over stuff that we're up to, as well as the fact that we have some advertisements. Now, I don't mean to get too defensive. That's not my jam here. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. Just suffice to say that we wouldn't be able to do this if it weren't for the people who support this show. It's one thing if you don't like what we're up to, but if you do like it and you want us to keep producing the content that we do, maybe you should consider listening all the way through and letting our sponsors know that you appreciate them. It's really as simple as that. I'm done talking about that. If you have any questions, feel free to email me directly. That's totally cool. All right. Next bit of feedback comes from Reddit user T-Lens, and this is in response to the Crystal Malt episode that we dropped a couple weeks back. They said, have there been any experiments calling the adding of body by crystal malts into question? I recently forgot to get crystal malt, brewed the beer anyway by substituting base malt, and it's thinner than I remember the last batch being.
I mean, you can't rely on your memory unless you take good notes, but
even then, right? Know. Unless you're comparing them side by side, I think it's tough to really, know if there's a difference.
Right. And even then I would say, can you do it in the triangle, So, I mean, the science says that there should be more longer chain and less fermentable sugars in a crystal malt and even some roasted malts. But, some of these yeasts nowadays seem to be such good chompers that, if you're talking like a small percentage, like if you're only putting like 2 or 3% of a crystal malt in, I would imagine then you can't tell. But if you're building like a big complex stout or a porter, and you're talking, a larger percentage up in the 8 to 10, 12%, you should be able to tell with most yeast,
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. And I didn't even consider the impact that yeast might be having on crystal malt's lack of an effect to put it simply.
There's so many moving pieces in play, especially like your mash temperatures. If your base malt is highly diastatic, has a lot of converting power, it's going to cover a lot of that up, potentially.
Sure.
I'm not saying absolutely, but
yeah,
there's just so many moving parts in play,
Yeah,
especially
totally.
whatever system he's using. Is he doing a recirc system? Is he just doing a batch sparge with a single infusion mash? There's so many things.
Yeah. Could be so many, I guess. Yeah, they this person asked if we've done any experiments kind of testing out this whole idea that crystal malts add to the body of a beer. We have, but they've been the more predictable ones. They've been the two that we did on Carapils and Carafoam. And in those ones, the results weren't significant. People were unable to tell apart beers made with or without either of those two purportedly body causing or body raising experiments. So, like Malcolm, like you mentioned, dude, I tend to be a little bit suspect when experience aligns almost perfectly with what's expected from something. I think it's just kind of normal human, that's what we do. So, maybe brew a couple batches side by side to test it out for yourself. We're definitely going to get to it at some point. I can say that.
Yeah. A lot of those Cara malts too, they're like low crystals. They're like crystal 8 or 10 or 15, so,
right. Yeah.
Once again, unless you're using like a high percentage, I use the analogy a lot. Are you whispering in a church or are you whispering at a rock concert?
That's a great analogy.
Every once in a while, I'll say something smart.
Well, anyways, a few weeks ago, in fact, it was the last time I think you were on the show, Malcolm, Jersey and Tim reviewed a habanero mead made by our friend Matt Crispin, who lives in Austin, Texas. He's a member of the Austin Zealots. I thought it was a pretty impressive review, especially considering the fact that neither of these guys had ever tasted a mead before, at least as far as they were aware. Well, that wasn't the only thing Matt sent me. He also included a Sizer, which is basically a mead blended with hard cider. I think they are fermented together. I've never made one, actually. But what did the boys think of this less spicy beverage?
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim. Ooh.
Yeah. It smells
pretty.
It smells like when you blend fruit. Oh, it's fruity. It's a cider maybe, huh? I haven't even tasted it. That's how learned we are. We have become learned men.
I'm thinking it's a sour.
It's a cider that incorporates various fruits. All right, let's drink it.
Dear God.
It's strong to quite strong. It's strong to quite strong.
It's a sour that's not quite sour.
Is it a shot? I don't know enough, so I need to drink it, but I don't want to. I don't want to. It's going to hit me. It's going to hurt me.
It had me fooled by the smell.
Oh, my God. It's beating me up. It's like taking my lunch money.
I really wanted to like this from the smell. But
that's the story of my life. What do you think? What do you think, Timmy?
You know, after
say it.
I dislike it.
I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Also, I'm gonna keep drinking.
Oh, I'm gonna drink it all.
But that's it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Maybe it's just not our style. I mean,
I like the way it smelled.
It beat me up, dude.
And yet I'm still drinking it.
I'm gonna keep drinking it.
Crispin, that's 0 for 2. Jersey and Tim just don't seem to have the palate for, this more sophisticated side of drinking, I guess. Malcolm, you a fan of Sizer?
When it's made well, yeah, I like all beverages and foods when they're made well. And from what I've had of Matt's stuff, been delicious so far. So, wrong audience, Matt. We still love you.
Well, but I think he knew that. I mean, I talked to him about
I know.
He was very, he's met Jersey, so he knew what to expect.
This is
from
part
Matt.
of the fun.
It's all part of the fun.
I would love
right?
to see Jersey go to like a hot couture, cuisine or something like that. It's like, why is this little figgy thing on top of my pudding? I mean, it just, those guys just, yeah.
We can definitely get this set up, I think, dude. Well, I said it before, I'm not a huge fan of mead or even honey for that matter, but I did find Matt Sizer to be rather tasty. There was something about the blend of honey with apple that really cut through that honey mead-like character and made it way more drinkable for me. Would I drink loads of it? I don't think so. But I wouldn't turn a glass down. In fact, I don't think Jersey was able to finish his entire glass. He gave us some pretty big bottles, and so I kind of pounded the rest of Jersey's there. It was pretty good. If you want your beer featured on the 1 Minute Beer Review with Jersey and Tim, you can email me, Marshall@brewlosophy.com, and we'll get you all set up. I really appreciate everyone who sent stuff in so far. We've got so much fun stuff coming up in the future, and I'd love to get your beer on here as well. It's a true sign of courage, if you ask me. Well, we've got to give some love to those who make this show possible. Please hear them out. We'll be back very shortly with some talk about malt extract. When dumping wort-soaked grain and leftover low-gravity wort while cleaning up after a brew day, did you ever wonder what your true efficiency would be if that wort made its way to the kettle instead? Using the brew bag, a fabric filter for all mash tuns and brewing methods, allows you to capture every last drop of wort. Not only does this increase kettle efficiency, it lowers your grain bill, which saves you money. Throwing wort in the trash is like dumping a 12-pack down the drain and just doesn't make sense. Use the brew bag and leave no wort behind. I've been using these filters for a long time and recommend them to everyone. I never have to worry about a stuck sparge, and cleanup is fast and easy. Go grab yourself a brew bag fabric filter at brewinabag.com and be sure to use code TBP17 at checkout to get a discount on your order. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste time chilling wort, which is why I use cleverly designed immersion chillers from Jaded Brewing. After some bad experiences with counterflow and plate chillers, I began the search for a more efficient chilling solution and discovered Jaded. That was nearly 4 years ago, and to this day, I continue to rely on the King Cobra and the Hydra to chill my wort in record time without the setup or cleaning hassle of other chillers. If you're looking for a way to optimize your brew day, I can't recommend Jaded chillers enough. Go see what they have to offer at jadedbrewing.com and let them know Brewlosophy sent you. Founded in 1978 by brewing pioneer Charlie Papazian, the American Homebrewers Association is a division of the Brewers Association focused specifically on protecting and promoting the hobby of homebrewing. In addition to their work lobbying for the rights of homebrewers across the country, they're also the primary sponsor of Brewlosophy.com. By joining the AHA, not only are you supporting their cause, but you get a ton of benefits as well. Discounts at breweries across the U.S., early access to tickets for events like the Great American Beer Festival, and you get to attend HomebrewCon, the world's biggest gathering of homebrewers. Head over to brewlosophy.com/AHA now to sign up to become a member. So before we get into the various types of extract available, because we all know there is a ton out there, why don't we talk a little bit about what exactly malt extract is?
Well, it's quite literally someone else, the producer, doing the mashing for you. So, all the whole brew process. So right up until, say, we chill, the maltster is a brew house, and there's various types of extract. There's, food grade, which is used for colorants and sometimes for livestock feed. They spray it on, or additives for food, to make things taste malty. I know early on, one of my first introductions to malt extract outside of brewing was buying malt syrup for one of Alton Brown's pizza recipes.
I remember that show. Yeah.
So I'm a big Alton Brown fan, Kenji Lopez Alt too. But back then I was like, what the heck is this all about? So I went and bought it, to try it. And, his theory about, how it affects the flavor, yada, yada, doesn't matter. But the point is there's various grades of malt extract, and it's used for lots of things, all through an industry. But brewing quality extract, just like brewing quality malted barley, is different than what's normally used. And it's actually a small percentage. It's brewing quality is a much smaller percentage on scale, throughout the...
That's really interesting. I remember, up until quite recently, actually, my idea of, there's a couple different types of extract. I think the two commonly known, what's used in brewing is what's called liquid malt extract, which is basically like malt syrup. And then there's the dry malt extract. And I was first introduced to liquid malt extract. And to be honest, I kind of developed this bias against dry malt extract because, whatever I get first is obviously the best, right? Yeah. And so I always wondered, like, this stuff has to be, everybody is boiled syrup, or, you do like a simple syrup and then you boil it down, or you make a caramel, and it looks basically like, liquid malt extract or LME. And I always assumed that's all it was that the maltster was doing a big mash and just making a wort of a specific certain gravity and then boiling it down. But someone was telling me recently that that's not necessarily how it's done for liquid malt extract.
No, for liquid. So like I started on is, so they do everything. If you walked into that place up until the chilling, or after the chilling phase, it looks like a brew house. They mill, they mash, they recirc. Most of them have very high tech automated breweries. So they have very tight controls. They decoction mash, and then most of the ones in the U.S., Breeze being the biggest, they don't typically hop. I don't think they have any hopped extracts, but some of the ones in England have some bittered and hopped extracts. So they either do or do not add hops. We'll assume that most of them aren't hopped. So they don't add hops, but they still do a normal boil, and then they go to chill it. And after they chill it, they'll put it through these heat exchangers with large surface areas, and they lower the pressure up until a point of pulling a vacuum, so they can boil at super low temperatures to stop causing color pickup. So they flash boil under vacuum, and it goes through various stages, and it allows them to get down to single digits, let's say somewhere between 10 and 8. I don't know the exact numbers anymore, but very low percentage of water. So it has a high percentage of solids. So that makes it shelf stable. And when I think about boiling, you're getting, you're condensing whatever it is that liquid is, or whatever is in that liquid actually, via evaporation of the, volatile, mostly water. Right. But when this is what you're telling me is what I had heard in the past. And it's almost like cool evaporation because of, it's because of a massively higher pressure, right? They're pulling this vacuum. Well, lower pressure,
which reduces the lower pressure. Yeah, they're massively lower pressure, which reduces the boiling point pretty much of any liquid.
Yeah, so it's just like boiling in Denver. If you're in Denver, let's say the water could boil at 205 instead of 212, which is atmospheric pressure, 1 bar. Now they're pulling a vacuum up as high as, I don't know their specifics, but let's just say 1 bar. So it's 1 atmosphere negative vacuum, and they could be boiling as low as 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And
that's crazy.
But they do it in stages. So it might start as high as 100 and something, and it steps down to 90 something,
Yeah.
But basically it only takes a couple minutes, so they don't get a lot of color pickup, but they evaporate all the water out of this syrup. Well, it becomes a syrup, right? Because they do a semi-high gravity mash and brew cycles. They're only making a 1060, 1070 wort.
That's fascinating. So I think, then you think about dry malt extract, which for those who like me in my beginning days had no idea what dry malt extract is because, again, LME was better. So that's all I ever bought. And it was also more expensive, surprisingly. But dry malt extract, which is basically just a powder, what's the difference in manufacturing process for that over liquid malt?
Yeah. So, my first exposure was liquid malt extract, and I didn't even know there was dry malt extract. When I found it, I thought that was overly processed. I think that's one more step of processing, and that was a turnoff to me,
Right.
And what they do instead of that evaporative boiling under pressure is they have these large spray columns where it bursts in like a very fine mist. They have like an atomizer, right? And it goes into this column, which is kept at a very high temperature. So that sounds like you're going to cook and darken. But what's going to happen is each one of those little droplets immediately evaporates, and then it has evaporative
It's like
cooling.
flash evaporation.
Yeah, flash evaporates.
Yeah.
It has evaporative cooling, so the flashing cools it down, and then all that's left behind is this solid. So it almost like snows in this column, and then it settles down onto this mat. Well, it depends on who's making it. There's various processes, but they settle it down and collect it. And if you just let it settle, it'd almost compact as a solid. So they have these screens and shakers, and it depends on the manufacturer, but it keeps these little droplets from compacting and keeps them separate so that they dissolve more readily.
It's amazing to me the amount of energy, literal like energy, that's invested in producing these malt extracts for brewers. Particularly when I'm not very sure it's too commonly used for the commercial market these days. I remember hearing about new craft breweries back in the early 2000s who would start off using malt extract, but as far as I know, most of them are now.
I still have a T-shirt from a place called The Brewery on Depot Street in Pittsfield, Mass., and they were an extract brewer.
There you go. Yeah.
1994, 1995. I still have the T-shirt. I might be throwing it away when I move here, but there were quite a bit of like pub systems that were designed to be extract brewers.
Right.
I bet there's still a lot more than we think of, especially contract brews and stuff like that.
Sure.
They're selling a lot of extract.
Yeah.
And it's not all going to home brewers.
Yeah, that's my thought, right? Is that there's no way the homebrewing market could sustain, the amount of money that they're investing in creating these extracts. It's just fascinating to me. Well, I know that people have kind of come up, particularly recently, with different methods for using each, LME and DME. I think they've kind of converged that using them is pretty similar, the ways they're used. Back when I started, it was like throw all of your extract in, blend with warm water, blend it up, and then do your boil like you normally would. I think nowadays there's some talk about like splitting your extract additions up to try to, maintain a lower color because the longer boil can, all of these things.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that stuff?
Well, you almost don't have to boil it because they've boiled it, right? Most of the thing you want to do is boil it for your isomerization of hops, right? So, as far as I know, most of them do a full boil. I don't know that, you'd have to ask the manufacturers. So you could just heat this stuff up, add bittering extract if you had it, pre-isomerized extract, then do your flame out addition, and that's your beer. Cool it down and ferment it. Or you could just do like a short boil, like 5-10 minutes. Like say you wanted to do like hot bursting. You wanted to get all your bitterness, like a lot of pale ales do nowadays, or IPAs, especially like, Haze Boy, juice bombs. So if you wanted to do one of those, you could literally just put your extract in and then do like a 10 minute boil.
Or
enough to,
Jason just dropped that experiment article that we did, that he did where he compared, boil additions to to a purely 100% flame out, hop stand for 20 minutes. You could sensibly, you could just bring that wort up to, 212 degrees, toss all your hops in, let it stand for 20 minutes and call it good, chill it down.
# face news. Yeah. That you could do that. And I'm not sure why we were told to boil extract for 60 minutes. I think it was just because of isomerization. It's like tradition. Oh, what we're going to do is do a 60-minute edition, a 30-minute edition, and a 5-minute. Remember that stuff?
Well, yeah, but I think there's, that makes sense to me that your extract isn't. The whole purpose of extract is here's your wort. You can save some time and you don't have to have all the equipment, which back in the day meant a 3-tiered system of some sort, so that you could fly sparge. But here's this stuff. You mix it with water. Now you have your wort. You can skip that, but everything else has to be the same. I think it keeps people feeling like they're actually engaged in the brewing process. And what we're learning about, just at least on our kind of sensory level, about the way, hops play with the boiling wort and how isomerization is happening. Yeah, maybe we're going to learn that it's not as necessary as we once thought, but I think that spans, all grain and extract. What are some pros and cons of malt extract? Let's go over some of the kind of the things that people like about using extract to make beer, and some of those things, without getting too controversial, that people may not like too much about it.
Well, the easiest thing is just to make beer with it, and then my biggest benefit, I think, is one, it's a known product, so you literally know what the gravity is. I remember seeing on some old forums where somebody would be like, "Oh, I missed my gravity with my extract." I'm like, add water, just add some water, dude. But really, you could literally have like a 15-minute boil, so it'd take longer to heat the water than it would to boil it.
Right.
You know what I mean? You could heat your water, add your extract, and one of the things that the guys at Breeze will recommend is adding your extract at around 90 to 100 degrees. So I think something like that. I mean, maybe it might be like 110 or 120, but don't add your extract to boiling water, because the vapor will cause it to condense and make these little teeny crusties. So you can just sprinkle the bag right into the water as you heat.
Yeah.
But you're done in 15 minutes. You could boil it in 15 minutes, do a hop burst at the end, get all your bitterness at the end. You get your aroma hops, and then chill it down. You could have like an hour brew day.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Our buddy James Spencer from Basic Brewing Radio, he has a relatively well-known approach to making like a 15-minute pale ale that he does exactly that with.
Sure.
For liquid malt extract, a little trick that I think works out well is to place your bag or your can, whatever it is, of liquid malt extract into the water as you're heating it, as long as you have it up off away from any flame, of course. But if you kind of put it in the water, it loosens up that extract and makes it easier to pour, so you're not trying to scoop it all out when the water's warm enough. I think obviously, I mean, the thing about extracts that where kind of a pro of it, at least, is that it's easy and it's quick. Now,
easy and quick.
It's easy and quick. And I've been known to say that, it's no easier than brewing all grain. And I stand by that. Though with not having to boil for 60 minutes and all of that stuff, I'll concede. It may not take as long to boil with, or to brew with extract as maybe even a short and shoddy all grain batch. But yeah, I think convenience ultimately is what it boils down to. Now, there are definitely some cons to using extract that people talk about. Again, I've said publicly in various forums that I think extract has an identifiable taste for the most part. Not that it's bad or not, nothing like that, just that it's unique. It's different from all grain. When I taste two beers side by side, I would think that I'd be able to pick out the extract one just because it has that flavor that I find identifiable. I get a lot of crap for that, because it's common now for people to say things like, you can make just as good a beer with an extract malt or liquid or dry extract as you can with all grain. And I'm not saying it wouldn't be as good. I'm just saying it would probably be different. And I don't think people agree with that.
Yeah, I think it depends on the beer and the freshness of the product. So if you had a very, very fresh liquid malt extract and then you did some steeping grains, I think if you did like a big porter or a stout or even like a big IPA, you could probably make a comparable beer. It might be a little bit different, but maybe no lesser in quality.
Yeah, sure.
Especially if you got very fresh LME or fresh DME. DME is more shelf stable because it has a lower moisture content, so it doesn't degrade as fast.
Right.
But so I'm not sure that can be true for a fresh German Pils or a Helles, or a Kolsch, or I don't know, any style that is more delicately flavored.
No, I don't disagree.
Well, some of the freshest LME I've ever seen is still a few SRM darker than doing an all Pilsner mash.
Absolutely. And that's going to come through in the finished beer. And to say that you can't make a good tasting beer with that is one thing. I'm not claiming that. Just to say that it tastes different has always been my claim. And we're going to get to some experiments we've done on that in a minute. I think the biggest complaint about extract, and I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure I know what this means, but the biggest thing has to do with this idea of the extract twang. Malcolm, maybe you can kind of go into that a little bit.
So I think, I just want to say off the front is that I wrote to the guys from Breeze and they were amazing. So they'd answer any question. They were so awesome, so helpful. And if they didn't have an immediate answer, They said, "Let me call you back. I'll write you back."
Yeah,
it was just
good people,
cool.
man.
Yeah. So when I asked them about that, what their opinion on that was, I was redirected to one of James Spencer's podcasts actually, and but the person answered it anyways and said, it's their belief that they think that twang might just come from poorly stored or old extract. Basically oxidation of the product.
Right.
Because you think about a lot of these warehouses, they're in all over the country. California, Arizona, East Coast. Swinging temperatures, and that's for every 10 degrees C, you have 2 to 3 times the rate of reaction for most natural reactions.
Right.
And if they recommend it, stored at like 60 or 70 Fahrenheit, and you're storing it with temperature swings up to 90, Fahrenheit, some of these products are aging at 2 to 3 times or more the rate than they expected to. So they're staling literally in months, weeks really. So LME is much more susceptible to that. And it's almost like LME is bottled beer and DME is canned beer. Bottled beer goes into the package with a lower dissolved oxygen. Canned, on average, goes into the package with a little higher dissolved oxygen. But the rate of pickup, because of the crown cap versus the can seal, is different. So they converge. So even though LME might be, say, a more peak product immediately, it basically oxidizes much faster because of the higher water rate or water percentage. So DME. You have a better chance of having better tasting DME, unless you're sitting there waiting for this LME to come off the truck.
Right. The interesting thing to me about this is that it's this flavor, whatever it is, has attached to it extract. So it's extract twang, right? I've got a hypothesis. I'm going to kind of go out on a limb with my hypothesis. I have tasted all grain beers that have a particular, what I would refer to as a twang to it. And in my opinion, when I've asked people who serve me these beers, or when I've made beers that have that, it's almost always, they're never extract, they're all grain. It's almost always more in line with what I expect nowadays from yeast like Dan Starr's Nottingham. That yeast for some reason imparts this kind of twangy thing that I get from it. And so maybe,
well, yeah.
And when you think about the fact that a lot of extract brewers are also sold, a pack of yeast that maybe was there. I mean, maybe not all of what people have assumed has been extract twang is just, I'm just trying to be nice to extract here for a minute. Maybe it's not all extract.
And shit all over Dan Starr.
Well, no, Dan Starr makes great yeast. I certainly don't mean to talk bad about Dan Starr. I'm not a fan of Nottingham yeast because very, very specifically because of this twangy thing that I get every single time I use it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's probably a combination of one, oxidation. That's my belief, because I just tasted a beer today from a pretty decent brewer at a study group. And he made a beer that tasted to me like it had a lot of crystal malt in it, and it did not. He showed me the recipe, and wow, it had like that honey, like a honey crisp apple flavor.
Yeah,
and he's by all rights otherwise a good brewer. And I think it was just a fermentation issue. So I think the combination of either poor performing yeast and potentially stale malt.
Yeah,
it comes off with that 2,3 pentane dione taste, which is that honey
thing,
yeah. And so that shows up again, stale oxidation robs the flavors, becomes muted, turns sweet. And then you add to that potentially poor performing yeast, which is going to mean your beer is going to be sitting there exposed to oxygen longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then a lot of esters combine with these stale flavors, and it gives you like that caramel sweetness.
Right. This is making my mind spin here a little bit. I'm really fascinated now by the impact. I was talking with the folks from Imperial. I love our sponsors because every once in a while they'll shoot like experiment ideas to me. Oftentimes they have nothing to do with the product they sell. And just today, actually, I got an email from Casey from Imperial Yeast asking if we've ever done an experiment comparing like pre-milled malt that's been stored for a long time to freshly milled malt, right? So,
we've talked about it. We just haven't done it yet. Right?
That's what I told her, man. It's like, it's on the list. What's not on the list? But this is making me wonder. I mean, I think we need to probably hit that one up first, but this is making me wonder what a pre-milled, like old, quote unquote, oxidized, because I'm not necessarily sure how, unmashed grains react to oxygen, but to compare like a 4-month-old sack of pre-milled grain to a similar extract, like oxidized extract beer of the same recipe, to see if you get that same kind of experience, that same sensory thing. I don't know if it's a twang or not, but anyways, just a thought.
Yeah, get on it.
I'll get on it. Yeah. Well,
that's supposed to be. You're supposed to tell me that, right? Is that how it goes?
We have done quite a few experiments on extract. I think we've got 3 in the books. When we come back from this quick break, that's what we're going to be getting into. Stick around.
Compact and simple to use with a small footprint for brewing indoors, the Grainfather makes it easy for you to brew professional quality beers at home. The Grainfather is an all-in-one brewing system that lets you brew all grain beer in a single compact stainless steel unit. It uses an electric heating element and pump to maintain a constant temperature and to circulate the wort during the mashing and cooling stages. It also comes with a counterflow chiller to reduce chilling times and produce high quality wort. And now, with the addition of their conical fermenter, the Grainfather takes things one step further by offering homebrewers state-of-the-art temperature-controlled fermentation just like commercial breweries use. And with the Grainfather Recipe Creator and Connect app, you can easily design a recipe, sync your brewing system with your phone, and then just sit back and relax as the app takes over and assures that you maintain your scheduled mash temps and boil schedule. Head to Grainfather.com to purchase your all-in-one brewing system today and to sign up for their free recipe creator tool. Once more, head on over to Grainfather.com, that's Grainfather.com, and get started today.
Shopping for brewing supplies online can be a real hassle, which is why we recommend Love to Brew. They've got great prices, super fast shipping, and they carry exclusive products like East Coast Yeast, the Brewer's Essentials brand, and their award-winning beer recipe kits. They're also the only place you can pick up your very own Brewlosophy recipe kit. The numbers don't lie. Love to Brew has hundreds of 5-star reviews and thousands of brewers are choosing them for their supplies and ingredients each year. Experience the difference at lovetobrew.com. That's love, the number 2, brew.com. So way back in 2014, curious of claims that extract could produce a beer of equal quality as all grain, I decided to test it out for myself. What I did is I brewed an extract batch next to an all grain batch, both presumably 100% Maris Otter. So I actually held out. I contacted More Beer. They told me that they were getting in a fresh batch of Maris Otter extract. And then I picked up some crisp Maris Otter. It was the floor malted Maris Otter malt as well. And I made 2 beers with 100% Maris Otter malt, in quotes there. The all grain batch was a full volume BIAB, brew in a bag. And then for the extract batch, I did this new method. I hadn't brewed with extract in a long time, but I added half of the extract which is about 4 pounds. I added that at the start of the boil, and then I added the rest of the LME with 15 minutes left to go in the boil. Both were boiled for 60 minutes with hops added at the same time, same amount, all of that stuff. They were treated exactly the same. This is that method that's said to help with color, but in the end, the extract wort was super dark compared to the really pale Maris Otter all grain wort. Both were, like I said, both were boiled for 60 minutes. They both ended at the same exact 1052 OG. So thank you, Beersmith. You worked for me. And then both were fermented with the same exact yeast, which was rehydrated. It was a dry yeast. Fermentation was observed in both beers the following day. And the Kreuzen on the extract beer, which was darker, the wort was darker in the beginning. So the Kreuzen was a little bit darker. It seemed to have kind of a layer of brown stuff on the top that the all grain fermenting wort or fermenting beer didn't have. So, but that was the only difference I noticed. Otherwise, similar fermentation activity. When the beers seemed to be done fermenting, I took hydrometer measurements and was pretty shocked that both beers finished at the same exact 1011 FG. So these beers started at the same OG, finished at the same FG. In my mind, there's no way that was going to be the variable that made them distinguishable. I kegged up the beers, and once they were carbonated, I served them to 14 people during a homebrew club meeting way back when. Now, again, this was back in 2014, before we'd adopted the triangle test, one of the first experiments that I did. And so the data is a little bit too cumbersome to go over in full detail on the show here. But for some highlights, everyone did notice the difference in color. It was pretty obvious. I did serve them. Everybody got 2 clear glasses of beer so they could see the colors were different. For aroma, pretty much everyone agreed that the extract beer was sweeter, maltier, and the all grain beer had a kind of a cleaner aroma to it. One person said that it smells like macro brew, which, for better or for worse, I guess. For the flavor, it was the same exact comments as the aroma. Again, sweeter, maltier for the extract, kind of cleaner and crisper for the flavor. And then when I asked people about preference, which beer they preferred more, of the 14, 8 said that they preferred the extract beer, while 6 said that they preferred the all grain beer. So almost an even split. You could say that, extract was better, but I don't call them like that. For me, my preference, as you might expect, was completely for the all grain beer. It was cleaner. It was crisper. I just thought it tasted better. It tasted more like that dry Maris Otter grainy thing that I enjoy. I did not tell the tasters what that it was Maris Otter. So, maybe if they'd known that, they'd have been more biased like me. But otherwise, my perception of the beers was pretty much in line with what everybody else said. That extract beer was definitely had a sweeter thing going on to it and was much more caramelly. I wouldn't say it tasted oxidized or anything. Just kind of thicker. It had a kind of a thicker mouthfeel as well, which people agreed with me on. So when we shared the results of this one, besides people telling us that, you need to do a triangle test, people proposed some possible reasons for these differences. And one of them was that the extract wasn't 100% Maris Otter. Now, I just kind of assumed it was because it was called Maris Otter extract. And I tried to look into it. I couldn't find any information, but there were some people who were claiming that they're aware of certain Maris Otter extracts that actually include some Munich malt. I'm not sure, Malcolm, if you know anything about that, but to me, that would explain the difference in color and flavor a little bit, at least.
I don't know about the Maris Otter one, but I know, for example, if you buy, say, Breeze, if you look at the back of say their pale ale extract, I'm not saying this is the case in this example, but it might say 90% pale 2-row and 10% crystal.
Right.
But they list them, and if you can go to Breeze and download their sheets, and it will tell you Pilsner Light has this in it, and it'll tell you their wheat malt extract is 65% wheat, and the balance of that is
Pilsner malt or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So it could be true.
So I'd seen that as well. And the extract I used was in a foil bag from More Beer that didn't say anything on it. But the claim that there was Munich malt in it kind of did have me scratching my head. Because to be honest with you, I've brewed a lot of beers with Munich malt. And this Maris Otter extract beer had a lot of those similar characteristics, kind of melanoid-y, rich, So maybe that was what it was.
Spoiler alert. More Beer isn't making their own extract. Someone's making it for them.
No, it's not More Beer.
but I'm just saying, it's a blend, made for them by some other company. And who knows?
And my understanding was, in talking with the folks from More Beer about it, was that it was also crisp. That's why I picked up crisp Maris Otter. But this, that was a long time ago. My memory could be escaping me here. Another explanation had to do with the age of the malt extract, with some people claiming that LME, as we were talking about earlier, darkens as it gets older, which is something Malcolm decided to test out. But before we get to the next experiment, I want to tell you all about Brewers Hardware, a rad company specializing in triclover compatible sanitary fittings, conical fermenters, kettles, and brew stands. Brewers Hardware offers a variety of unique and hard-to-find items for both the home and craft brewing markets, including high-quality stainless fittings at competitive prices and with very fast shipping. For those who live near Huntington Beach, California, which is not too shabby of a place to live, they also offer in-house welding for customized kettles. Head over to brewershardware.com, or you can give them a call at 714-891-1150 to find anything you need for your brewery. If you mention Brewlosophy at checkout, they're going to throw in a free gift for you as well. That's brewershardware.com. All right, Malcolm. So the impact of age on liquid malt extract.
Yeah, so this experiment was born out of an accident. I went and bought some extract for something else, and when I got it home and I was looking at it to make a starter, it was extremely dark. It was supposed to be like a light pills or something like that, or a golden light, and it was definitely amber. So I looked at the bottom of it, did some research on the date codes, and called around and found some newer stuff, and I pitched it to the crew and said, hey, what about if I do this experiment instead of the one I had planned? And it was pretty eye-opening, not only, one, how hard it is to find fresh extract. Some of these places, they order in bulk, and it moves as fast as it does, and it could be around for a while, and it might go through 2 or 3 middlemen. It's pretty incredible. It was hard to find fresh malt in our extract.
I have seen cans of malt extract in various homebrew shops that was over 3 years old, just sitting up on the shelf.
Yeah, it's like they're doing verticals.
Extract verticals.
Yeah. People are calling around like, hey, do you have any 2014, man?
I really want that stout extract, man. I hear it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it was amazing. And then I some more beer hooked me up. I called those guys and they had some pretty fresh stuff. So, brought it home and it was amazing. If you go to the Brewlosophy site and look up impact of age on liquid malt extract, you can see as soon as I'm pouring it in, you can see the color difference. And
the difference was stark. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And after the boil, still amazing. And even upon pour, I had the beers side by side, and you would swear they're two different beverages and our styles of beer. And I brewed it as a 100% extract batch. I didn't add any character malts or anything. I think I designed it to be a German Pils, and it didn't end up tasting like a German Pils. Let's just say that because of the sweetness on both of them, even the fresh extract. After it was served, it lagered for quite a bit just because of some work commitments, and I served it to 35 people. And at 35, we'd expected 17 to correctly identify the unique sample. So 2 people had the old, and each person got 2 samples of the old and 1 sample of the fresh LME. And 23 people were able to detect the unique beer. So
that's a phenomenally strong finding. 17 needed out of 35. And 6 more than that were capable of distinguishing the odd beer out. So what that tells us basically is that when you're using old extract, doesn't say anything about whether one's better than the other. It just says that old extract is pretty likely going to produce a different tasting and smelling beer than beer made with a fresh version of that same exact extract.
Yeah, and on top of that, the preference data. So one of the things you mentioned it before, I think you didn't tell them that you used Maris Otter, but you also didn't tell them what style of beer you had made on the first experiment. So, they're told, can you tell these beer, or they're asked, can you tell these beers apart? And they're not given anything, no pretext. So they're not told, can you tell them apart? They're Pilsners, they're not told anything. So then when they later get asked the preference question, they're still going on yumminess. Which one do they prefer? Which one is more wonderful to them? Right. And that's it. So can you imagine having that pretext being stripped away from you? You're just purely basically casting your vote for which one you enjoy more. Yeah. Of the 23 who made the accurate selection, 11 people preferred the fresh and 9 liked the old. that's not a huge difference.
No, it's basically an even split. I mean, when you look at it, and that means, what's that? So that was 20 people, which meant I think three ended up saying that while they detected a difference, they didn't necessarily have a preference for one or the other. They were both fine.
Exactly. It's like meh,
Yeah.
What do you like? Lamb or beef?
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
So, I thought that was interesting. And then, we have the benefit of talking to some of these people after the experiment is done. And it was neat to find out why they liked it.
Yeah.
Some people were just said, well, I don't know what kind of beer it is. It tastes like a Scottish ale. I'm like, yeah, it does.
I mean, it's the new Scottish Pilsner style.
Yeah, it's 100% Pilsner extra, with Tettnanger hops or whatever it was. So I thought that was neat. And now when I serve that beer, the old one, I just tell people it's a Scottish ale. I tell them it's like a Scottish export, and they never argue. They're just like, okay,
yeah, man.
I still have it.
That's its own show. I have my own kind of theory. Well, I have, my approach to a beer is what it tastes like, not what you call it. So that's my own thing. That's its own show. Malcolm, what did you think of these two beers? What were your impressions?
Well, they were brewed to the best of my ability. I think they tasted fine. Not what I expected in either case because of the age of both the extracts, even the quote fresh one, which was 3 months old or whatever it was. So I entered it in a competition, Beer and Sweat, which I mentioned I think every episode.
Go Beer and Sweat, yeah.
But yay. But anyways, I drove the beers out, and I had to decide which one I wanted to bring. I could have brought both, I guess, but I brought the new one, the fresher extract and beer, and I entered it as a Helles export. And it scored like 38 and 39. I mean, it scored really well. And it didn't place, because it's a good competition in some good competitors and brewers out there. But one of the judges is a good friend. She is a grandmaster. And some of her comments were just like, oh, this is a nice beer, fits the style very well. It was amazing, because and I talked to her about it afterwards, and she was pretty cool, about the experiment, and she was happy that I shared what it was because it was eye opening to her too.
It makes me wonder so much, like what because I have this conviction that I can taste extract, and yet you made this. And maybe I've only ever had beers made with crappy old extract. I don't know, but I can't help but wonder, like if I had tasted that beer, if I was the judge on that panel and I tasted that beer thinking or being told that it was a Munich export or Helles export, would I have had that experience? Because judging in the past, I've written down, was it tastes like extract, which just sounds like such a jerk thing to write, but
well, by all accounts, this woman has a great palate. I mean, not only because of her rank, sure, but a lot of the brewers around her respect her and ask her to come in to evaluate her beer, and their beer. And she didn't say, I mean, she's just a professional anyway, so she's not going to, zing the beer, but she scored a 38 or 39, I forget, because one was 38, one was 39. And all of her opinions were it was a good beer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was entertaining.
Totally.
For me. So I like the fresher version because even the old version, if I call it a Scottish in my mind, I think there's a bias there in my head. I can't get past it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna we did that first extract comparison. And, we got all the complaints that we did, and there was no triangle test. So, of course, I wanted to revisit it. And I thought the best way to do that would be to use a couple of kits produced by the same place. And so I was in talks with Great Fermentations at the time, and they offered to send me a couple of kits of their, I think they call it their Brain Eater Pale Ale, which is like a Zombie Dust clone. Now, I've never had Zombie Dust, so I was kind of excited. It's like a hyper Citra beer. And so they sent me one extract kit and one all grain kit. My assumption there, this was an idea given to me by a reader, by the way. The idea being that they designed these things to be as similar as possible. So I brewed both of these beers up, treated them both exactly the same. And I just followed the instructions. I think I ended up adding the liquid malt extract before the boil and the dry malt extract later on in the boil, something like that. And when both worts were done and sitting in the fermenters, the color was identical. I mean, they were, to my eyes, They were exactly the same. So that was promising considering my first experience. The OGs on the beers were exactly the same as well. However, the extract batch, when fermentation was finished much higher at 1019 FG, sort of what I expected to see in the last experiment that I did on this, while the all grain batch finished at a more appropriate 1012 FG. So, this obviously is a place where I'm going, well, that's, that could be the reason for any distinguishability right there. But we went ahead with it. I mean, that is a function of the variable, in my opinion. Beers were kegged up and carbonated, and then I served them to 20 participants. At that number of participants, 11 would have to get it right to correctly select the odd beer out in order for us to say that it was significant. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. 11 people were able to identify the unique sample in the triangle test, allowing us to say that the extract beer was, it was different than the all grain beer yet again. So, even though we didn't do the triangle test in the first one, it did seem that people were capable of telling them apart. My impressions on these beers were exactly the same as before. The extract beer had a much more malty sweetness to it. I think it finished a tad darker than the all grain beer, though they were pretty much the same. It cleared up a little bit more than the all grain version as well. But the beers were different, and it's not necessarily that one was worse than the other, but my preference definitely was for the all grain beer, even when doing my own blind triangles. So, I think what I found in that experience was essentially that extract it confirmed my very, very unpopular opinion that extract does kind of have a flavor of its own.
Yeah. I was prepared for this experiment to come back non-sig because of all the hops, and everything. And it was pretty surprising to me that this one was loud enough, the delta was big enough to still show through all that. Because this was a, what would you say? It was a zombie dust clone?
Yeah, zombie dust clone.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty impressive, to me.
I thought so too. And, talking with people afterwards, in terms of their preference and whatnot, you had 4 people who said that they liked the all grain beer better. 2 said that they liked the extract beer. This is out of those 11. 3 said that this is always an interesting question. And this is a small aside, but with the triangle test, it accounts for random guessing. That's why it's a statistic, right? So 3 people said that they just didn't even taste a difference. So they just guessed right. You can't really trust that. Maybe they did taste a difference, whatnot. They at least selected the right beer in the triangle. But then 2 said that even though they noticed a difference, they just had no preference. So again, it's not like one's a clear winner in terms of preference. But it is interesting, no less. And I think, I'm confident telling people, yes, extract can be used to make good beer. Those beers aren't going to taste exactly the same as a all grain version of that same recipe. And that's not a bad thing.
It also brings up the concept that people say, well, you can just add a lot of hops and it'll cover a fault,
I know,
because so I'm not saying this is a fault, but obviously the malt tasted differently.
Yeah, exactly.
So not only obvious because it is different malt, but people could tell, right?
Yeah.
So the base beer is different, but the hopping schedule is the same.
Right.
And people could tell. And that's a lot of hops in that beer.
Yeah, definitely. Well, outside of just using the malt extracts that we've discussed for making beer directly, there are some other uses I just want to hit on real quickly before we finish the show. So they're commonly used to make yeast starters as well. And I know I still do that. I always keep dry malt extract on hand for making starters. Malcolm, what else do you use extract for?
Gravity correction is a common one. So if you are brewing for a specific task or reason and it's important to you to hit a specific original gravity, then having a little bit of DME, it's real easy. You can go onto a lot of these calculators and just do a gravity collect. I think Brewer's Friend has one. You can just do a gravity correction calculation. You can say, this is my volume, this is my gravity, and it will tell you, add 4 ounces of DME.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned that occasionally you'll use malt extract for making sour beers, like quick turnaround sour beers.
Oh, yeah. So our friend Derek Springer has done this as well and talked about it. But yeah, absolutely. You can make a fairly decent sour beer with extract, just 100% extract. Or I like to use a portion of wheat extract because that's like 65% wheat per breeze, and then you can add a little bit of flavoring, steeping malts if you want to, and then just pitch your bugs. Because if you notice a lot of our experiments, the final gravity is a couple, like gravity points higher than standard. So for example, your zombie dust clone one you just talked about, your final gravities were 1019 and 1012.
Yeah.
Well, that might be beneficial if doing a beer in which you want that fermentation character and that you want a chance for the microbes to chew on more.
Yeah, right.
You have longer chain dextrins. So, it's not always about the malt with some of these beers.
Yeah.
So sour beers are great. Another one is making very, very big beers. So to extend your mash length as far as not your mash length, but your gravity of that mash length. So if you're only capable of, say, making like a 1080 beer on your system, you can goose it up a couple points by using liquid malt extract or dry extract. Just add it to it at the flame out.
Yeah, super easy and really predictable way to do that. Well, I've got nothing against malt extracts. I'll continue using them in my brewery, specifically and primarily for making yeast starters, just because I like brewing all grain. But man, for those who are making these beers and winning awards and having a great time brewing beer using extracts, by all means, man, keep doing it. It's good stuff. If anything, I think our experiments here are just showing that they are, all grain and extract beers are different products, and that's completely okay. If you'd like to read more about these experiments and all of the other wacky stuff we're up to, you can head over to brewlosophy.com. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it soothes my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no